Okay, so hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the pharmaceutical and the health products industry and the influence on the Congress of the United States. So first of all, it's important to understand who they are. So the pharmaceutical and health products industry includes companies that research, develop, manufacture, and sell medicines, vaccines, medical devices, and other healthcare products. Some of the most well-known companies are Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, and Eli Lilly. So this industry is extremely important because it helps create treatment for diseases. So improves healthcare technology and increases the life expectancy around the world. In addition, organizations such as PHRMA, which stands for Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, represent the interest of many pharmaceutical companies in the politics and the public policy. So now let's talk about their missions and their objectives. So the main mission of the pharmaceutical industry is to improve people's health through the innovation and the medical research. They invest billions of dollars every year to create new medicines and treatment for illness such as cancer, diabetes, and the heart disease. However, besides the healthcare goals, the industry also has political and economical objectives. For example, the pharmaceutical companies try to influence the laws related to drug prices. So it's like patents, healthcare regulation, and insurance policies. They want to protect their profits and maintain competitiveness in the market. So this leads us to the influence of the industry. So the pharmaceutical industry is considered one of the most powerful lobbying industries in the United States. Lobbying means trying to influence government decisions and the public policies. According to Open Secrets, the pharmaceutical and health products companies spend millions of dollars on lobbying and campaigning contributions every election cycle. They donate money to both Democrats and Republicans in order to maintain relationships with the politicians from both parties. For the 2023 and 2024 election cycle, the pharmaceutical political action committees donated around $16 million to the federal candidates. About $6.6 million went to Republicans and around $5.2 went to Democrats. So this shows that the industry does not only support one political party. Instead, it tries to maintain influence no matter which party controls the Congress. Now, I will mention the two most recent members of the Congress who received the most pharmaceutical industry contributions. The first one is Brett Guthrie, a Republican congressman who received approximately $507,000. The second one is Bob Casey Jr., a Democratic senator, who received around $495,000. Both politicians are connected to healthcare policies and committees, which makes them important for the pharmaceutical industry. Let's analyze their positions. Brett Guthrie has generally supported policies that encourage pharmaceutical innovation and reduce the government regulation on the industry. He has also discussed the importance of lowering drug prices, but critics argue that receiving large donations from pharmaceutical companies could influence his political decisions. On the other hand, Bob Casey Jr. has supported healthcare access and lowered prescription drug prices for Americans. However, he also supports investment in medical research and innovation. His position seems more balanced between helping consumers and supporting the industry. But this situation creates an important debate. Some people believe pharmaceutical companies need strong profits to continue developing new medicines and technologies. Others believe the industry has too much political influence and that this contributes to high healthcare and prescription drug costs in the USA. In conclusion, the pharmaceutical and health products industry plays a major role not only in healthcare, but also in politics. Through lobbying and campaign donation, the industry maintains strong influence in Congress and helps shape healthcare laws and policies. Understanding the relationship is important because healthcare policies directly affect millions of people, especially in areas such as medicine, prices, insurance coverage, and access to treatment. So, thank you very much for listening.
Now I will explain how a third-party country influences U.S. foreign policy towards Iran, and we're going to focus on Israel. For one, Israel sees Iran as a global and national security threat due to its nuclear program and also due to the regional impact. To influence US foreign policy, Israel uses both lobbying and soft power tactics. In terms of lobbying, pro-Israel organizations like the American Israel Public Affairs Committee enjoy considerable influence in Washington, D.C., and can lobby politicians and congressmen to push for tougher measures, including sanctions and military operations against Iran. Moreover, Israel's soft power tactics can involve sharing intelligence information, strategic communications to the media, and personal communications between Israeli and American policymakers. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has been especially influential in shaping American perceptions of the Iranian threat in this regard, and this has been through the years. So it has been like more than 20 years ago. Netanyahu has been shaping this perception of the Iranian threat. Recently, one such instance occurred when the United States decided to conduct joint military strikes against Iran in the year 2026. It was reported that Netanyahu personally lobbied the US President Donald Trump for the operation using intelligence information. In addition, Israel strongly opposed against the US and Iran diplomatic negotiations that were being made between 2025 and 2026, pushing the US towards a more confrontational approach instead of diplomacy. Taken together, all these measures and approaches, it illustrates how both lobbying and narratives have contributed to altering the US policy from negotiating to military actions with Iran. Also, this indicates that US foreign policy is not formulated internally alone, but externally as well, with allies who have an impact on decision-making processes. To conclude, Israel serves as a case of study for how a third-party country can influence US diplomacy and foreign policy, and also the military policies towards Iran directly. Okay, we just saw the video about the statements made by Netanyahu, and we're going to analyze this and explain how he uses framing. So, the Prime Minister describes Iran as an existential threat, making the use of powerful communicative technique known as framing. According to him, Iran can be considered not only as a country that is opposing Israel, but also as its mortal enemy. This creating an image of fight for survival, a situation that is for life or death. Also, by framing his country's actions, Netanyahu tries to present them as inevitable and legitimate. For instance, he describes Israeli strikes and attacks as defensive and preventive measures rather than acts of violence and war. As he puts it, the goal of the attacks was the elimination of any future threats posed to Israel, including those associated with nuclear weapons. He emphasizes also cooperation with the United States and his country in terms of this issue. Thus, framing can be seen as a tool aimed at portraying the enemy as dangerous and threatening, while justifying any possible actions against it. Basically, Netanyahu uses framing to shape the narrative of war, describing it as a problem that's being needed to be taken care of urgently, because it's a situation that is life or death, to justify military operations to the international community.
Now we're going to talk about the legislative outcomes. We're going to talk about recent wins or defeats in legislation related to the special interest groups, which are pharmaceuticals in our case, and the role of the industry or SIG in supporting or blocking policies. Perfect. Before we dive into that, let's quickly define what a special interest group is, or SIG. An SIG is an organization, whether a corporation, a trade association, a union, or a coalition, that works to influence the government decisions in order to protect or advance the interests of its members. They do not represent the general public. They represent a specific sector, which in our case is pharmaceuticals. In our case, the pharmaceutical SIG is led by organizations such like PHRMA or Pharma, the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, which they actually represent the world's largest drug companies. And their main battlefield is not the laboratory, it's Congress. Okay, to understand the current legislative landscape that we found ourselves in, we need to go back to 2022. Why? Because in this year, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and it was a historic blow to the industry. Despite the pharmaceutical and health product industry pouring over $372 million into lobbying that year, you must take this into consideration, it suffered a major legislative defeat when a law was enacted allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices directly with manufacturers for the first time. The industry had been blocking exactly that for over 2 decades. So what did they do? What they do best. They fought back. Okay, so you may ask yourself, what happened after the last 2 losses? Did they lose again? No. What happened is a big win happened. The one big beautiful bill. You'll understand it later on. With a new administration and a Republican-controlled Congress, this is very important, the industry found a political opening and they took it. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed into law on July 4, 2025, expanded exemptions for orphan drugs, which are those that treat rare diseases, from Medicare price negotiations under the IRA law. Previously, the exemption only covered drugs treating a single rare condition, but the new law expanded it to multi-indication orphan drugs, protecting the high prices of these lucrative products and potentially saving the industry up to $5 billion over the next 10 years. I'm gonna give you guys a concrete example to make everything clear. Merck managed to delay its blockbuster drug Keytruda, which generated $17.9 billion in US sales in 2024 alone from Medicare price negotiations by at least 1 year. 1 year is a lot. That is political influence turned directly into profit. That's straight profit. Now, what's the bottom line? The industry lost the initial battle, as we already talked about, with the IRA, and the courts confirmed it. But it responded with a massive counteroffensive. $227 million in federal lobbying in just the first half of 2025, on pace to easily surpass its all-time record of $388 million. $388 million, that's a lot of money, which was set in 2024. And it worked. The ethical implications of all this, I'll leave that for the conclusions section.
Now, we've got to the 5th point of this presentation. We're going to speak about the conclusions we have, and we're going to part this in two points. Point A and point B. First point is going to be the key takeaways. So throughout these presentations, we followed the money, and what we found was clear. The pharmaceutical and health products industry is not just one of the most powerful economic forces in the United States, it's one of the most powerful political forces as well. From Section 2, we learned that this industry invests $100 million in direct lobbying, grassroots campaigns, and digital advocacy. Not randomly, but strategically. We have to remember that, targeting both Democrats and Republicans to maintain influence regardless of who controls Congress. From Section 3, we saw the politicians who receive contributions from the industry tend to support policies aligned with pharmaceutical interests from drug paying protections.
Now, we're going to speak about point B, as I said before, reflections on ethical issues, influence, and transparency. But beyond the numbers, we're going to speak about this. This presentation forces us to ask a deeper question. Is the system ethical? The industry argues that lobbying is a legal, legitimate form of political participation. They invest in innovation, they employ millions of people, and develop treatments that save lives, of course. This is true, but drug development is expensive and risky, and some level of policy engagement is reasonable. However, when a single industry can spend hundreds of millions of dollars per year to shape the laws that regulate it, when the same companies negotiating drug prices are also funding campaigns of the lawmakers doing the negotiating, the line between legitimate advocacy and undue influence becomes very difficult to draw. The result is a system where transparency is limited, where dark money flows to PACCs and trade associations, and where the average citizen has no equivalent voice.